God.
What is up, everybody?
Well, let me say really quick. If I get dropped out, I'm going to. We're already live.
We're already live. You've been here for 9 seconds, man. Welcome to Dock
If
Talk.
I get dropped out.
I was gonna say, is that the intro you use every night?
Yeah, that's the intro we use every night. You're kind of like our cover model to Dock Talk. I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I'm just going to play the entry to my show. Hell,
send it over. I'll just play everybody's intro.
That's a song that you can't get that out of your head. The intro to Jim's show. That song is very catchy.
It is. Thank you, Brock Zeman.
It's all a piece of art, and we got modeling agents going on. Jackson Kayak modeling agents. It is what it is. Everybody, welcome back to Dock Talk. I am your host. These guys are your hosts. Let's go around the room and get started here. I'll let each one of you introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself to those who may not know who you are, and we will start with Michael.
Oh, on the hot seat.
Yep.
Mike Fiorenza and the Texas coast. I've actually fished freshwater and saltwater, primarily saltwater, but I live right next to a freshwater lake, and Lake Conroe is 15 minutes from my house. And within an hour and a half, I've got 5 different lakes to strike. So there's a lot of water to get out there and go do. Just fish and fish and fish. So primarily Galveston, Freeport area, but I also head down south towards Dustin's area. His tournament partner, redfish tournament partner, and we fish all the way down to the coastal bend.
Very nice, very nice. Leads us to, I'm gonna let Jim go next.
Okay, well,
I feel that's appropriate.
No, he is playing. Is that Michael on the screen?
Gotta have my intro music. That would be Brock Zeman. Anybody interested in the intro to the kayak fishing show? Jim Sammons, kayak fishing show host for 13 years. Been kayak fishing since the late 80s, guiding since the early 90s. Not really guiding much anymore, but lucky enough to have been kayak fished all over the world and love doing it. Caught a lot of big fish, had a lot of first marlin off a kayak. Just been doing it a long time. You do it a long time and you're on the water a lot, you get lucky a lot. So I got a lot of records and stuff that at least were records at one time. I don't even know anymore. I don't pay much attention, but
a man of many accolades, as we will call you.
Just old. Just old.
Well,
been doing it a long time.
Age before beauty.
Yeah.
Our cover model for the Dock Talk program, one Mr. Jameson Redding.
Before you go, like Jim, you said you got the first marlin, but how many billfish? I'll say billfish. How many billfish do you think you've caught from a kayak?
Well, as a guide, I've had my hand on the bill of over 50 billfish on my kayak. How many of those were personal fish was probably about 18. But I tell you what, the scarier part is always the landing it, the billing it, because we don't pull it up the side, say, oh, it's a catch. No, for us, it was always grab it by the bill, pull it over our lap.
Like muskie.
Yeah. So just for perspective, there's just not that many people that have even landed a billfish, much less a marlin, much less, a larger or big, good size marlin, from a kayak. I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't even, that I know of. I may have hooked a sailfish in Florida during the sailfish tournament for a few seconds. Not sure what it was. Didn't get to see it, but that's probably the closest I've ever came to landing a billfish in a kayak. So I just always find that really impressive, and just the thought of even dealing with something like that. Before we started, Michael was talking about it being a bobber sitting out there when you're offshore fishing in a kayak.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there dealing with fish that can stab you, can hurt you.
And that's the thing. It's like I've caught a lot of big tarpon too, even though I'm in San Diego. I mean, I've just in my travels got a lot of big tarpon, and they're super exciting, but they don't have a 3-foot spear on the end of their face. And that's the sketchy part, is dealing with one of those. And I mean, I had one jump right over the back of my kayak. I had one in my hand that it flexed, and it was totally my fault. And it was in the learning process of how to land these things. And as I brought it up, it came and just slammed to the side of my kayak, and its bill literally went like right across the front of my face. Jeez. And I got slammed into my buddy. It was his fish. I was helping land it, and I got slammed into him, or I would have gone in the water. But I mean, the bill literally, we had video of it, and the bill was just like,
yeah.
So yeah, they're scary.
I'm Jameson Redding, not that cool. So I'm not the billfish guy.
But you have your own intro music.
Should I? Well, I mean,
yeah, you should. You should. It's only right.
I don't have it like queued up, so give me a minute while I talk for a second. But yeah, so I'm brand manager, right? Brand manager over at Jackson Kayak, and host of the new show Road Trip Angler. So really exciting stuff there, and had a really good time the first season. We just did 4 episodes, but we're already talking about season 2 here and getting the plans together. So
yep,
super cool.
The first 4 episodes were Delaware paddle sports, OKC, Roy's Bait and Tackle, and then Caney Fork down in lovely Tennessee.
That's right. Here we go. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Oh, yours is Adam, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The freestyle fisherman. These are down your way, Mike.
Yep. Really good guy.
Yeah, he's great, dude. Yeah, if you don't know who Adam J is, or the freestyle fisherman, definitely look him up. I mean, he's just got some amazing music, but a lot of it is about our lifestyle and fishing and just being on the water. And yeah, he's just a good dude. All he does.
Super, super solid guy.
So as we move forward here, one of the things that we like to do on Dock Talk is we like to have you guys tell us a little bit about the boats that you guys are currently fishing in, or would like to be fishing in Jim's case. It doesn't matter who goes first, and just kind of walk us through your boat. Tell us a little bit about it and the Jackson Kayak that you guys are using out on the water.
Michael, go.
Yeah, Michael, go.
So I'm Mike Fiorenza, and I have a kayak problem. I've got a Kraken 15.5, which is never leaving the stable. 2 to 14s. I've got my 22 team boat is the U-Pick, and then I have my 21 Kusa FD. So I've kind of got it all kind of covered, and I run a Torpedo 403 and 1103. But guiding, I put clients on paddle boats. So we're out there on the Kudas, and I'm basically running the U-Pick and with the motor so that I can recover or chase if I have to. But again, if it's only one client, I'll go out and paddle. I still love paddling. It is still my favorite way to fish, 8 inches of water with fish backs out of the water and chasing up on the bank. That is absolutely my way of fishing. It also is a very muddy and dirty way of fishing. And I think the dirtier you get, the more fun you have. So
we don't get real dirty where I am. The water's too deep.
Yep.
Well, of course, my number one boat is the Kraken. And that's my favorite, as you were saying. I mean, I love to paddle. Right now I cannot paddle. So I am running a 22-foot Defiance Pilot House as my boat. I've got the new NAR sitting in my front yard with a skeleton on it as a decoration for Halloween. So really looking forward actually to having that thing out on the water, because my one-time test pedaling it was such a vast improvement over the old ones. The most fun boat, at least the one as far as that I've spent the most time in for the last couple of years, has been the Blue Sky. I love fishing out of the Blue Sky. I mean, it is just fun. It's comfortable. For my bad back, being able to sit basically in a chair I'm sitting in right now and pivot and stand up and sight cast. I love the Blue Sky, and I just recently put I had dual Torpedo 403s on it, which was really cool, but it didn't function very well. It didn't steer very well. So I recently put a single centerline 1103 on it, and then I will still control it with the rudder. And that thing now turns on a dime and it motors. It's super fun. So I can't wait to actually be able to spend a little bit more time on that, because I've always loved I've done so much fishing with Jameson on the Blue Sky down in Louisiana, and it is the perfect boat for that. I think the only thing that would be better than that is to actually have a really skinny water flats boat. But other than that Blue Sky kicks butt in that environment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I'm kind of like Mike. I think I have a problem as well. And kayaks are kind of like golf clubs. And I don't golf, but I at least know that you do need different clubs for different situations while you're out on the course. And that's
100%.
That's kind of where I'm at with the kayak. And so right now in my driveway, I have a Take Two with the 1103 on it. I've really enjoyed that platform as a motorized solo platform this year. We've also used it as a camera boat quite a bit because it's just so stable and does really well with that 1103 Torpedo. I have the NAR. From a pedal standpoint, that boat is fast. Of course, the whole team, Jim was a part of it, but we had a whole bunch of input from our team at Jackson on that boat. So it's been really cool to get that boat launched and get it out there and feel the difference in the new drive and just the fishability of that boat. Michael, you were there when we kind of got to put them on the water for the first time, actually. Was down in Texas when we were down there with Dustin and Michael and a few others. And so that's been a really cool boat for me. And then I've got a couple of Kilroys out there right now in the driveway, and I use those as my lightweight throw around. Just, it's I can throw that thing on my shoulder and carry it down to the water. It's just the lightest boat really that we've ever made for fishing. And so it's a very versatile boat for me. And we don't have it in the line. We had it in the line last year as a limited run because sit insides typically don't sell as well, but it's kind of like paddle boats now, paddle kayaks versus pedals. It's just been the evolution, but there's definitely a place for just about every boat that Jackson makes if you know where to use it and find the right one.
For sure. Different tools for different jobs. Mm-hmm. And that's why it is cool to have different boats. And so I've enjoyed in my travels, because I'm always going to someplace different. We'll always have a different boat there. So I've fished off pretty much everything Jackson makes and a lot of other stuff. And it definitely is different tools for different jobs. And as I always say, sure. Don't tell me how to have fun. It's just like, this is what's working in this day. Yeah, I'm throwing a motor on it and I'm having a blast. Well, it's not pure kayak fishing. I don't care. I'm having fun. You see the smile on my face? I'm having fun.
I think we've left kayaks. The traditional definition of a kayak, that we've left that kind of in the dust. I mean, at this point, it's
that's safe to say for sure.
Well, I don't know for you guys. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say I was talking to the first rep for Ocean Kayak, my buddy Mark Olson, and we were talking about the old days and the old Scupper Pro, and that was what I really fished off the most. That's what I caught my first marlin off, and people wouldn't even think of using that thing now. I mean, it's not user friendly. It's not stable, but it paddled like a dream. But the funny thing is back then, and again, I'm old, so back then, it was those, or a lot of guys were, still in touring boats, and they're like, "Oh, I love the Scupper Pro, but it's so heavy," and it was like 50 pounds. It's like, it's so heavy. It's like, and everything has just gotten heavier and heavier and heavier since then. It's like, man, I would love to go back to those days of having a super light. I'd love to have a Kraken that was like carbon fiber. I mean, it would just be awesome. Because lightness is, as I'm getting older, believe me, man, I picking up these boats gets tougher and tougher. Bad shoulder, bad back.
You start having to have trailers and stuff like that to make it easier, for sure.
It does, and that's one of the things. I mean, to talk about for what you guys do when we go as kayak fishermen, we hit the boat ramp or the launch or wherever we're at. How much time on average are you guys taking to set up to get out there? I know Jameson obviously probably longer than me and Michael since you guys got TV shows, but on average, about how long does it take to get everything set up?
Well, if I'm just going fishing by myself and I'm not having to worry about it, not that long, because I do have a trailer. So my boat can be fully rigged on the trailer and I just slide it off onto the sand and then drag it out into the water. So it's a pretty short setup. And the boats, I mean, and that's one thing, talk about the old boat. Well, now the new boats are just so much easier to rig. They're rigging possibilities and solutions and ease is just, I mean, that's the thing that has progressed as much as anything in these boats is the rigging possibilities. And thanks to companies like Yak Attack, who are making, all these rigging solutions so much easier. Back in the day, I was making rod holders. I used to make rod holders and sell rod holders to kayak fishermen. That was one of the products I made. I made bait tanks. I made game bags because it was such a small market, just a few people, and there was no company making stuff for kayaks.
Do you guys miss the PVC rigging days?
I don't know. Like for me, so thinking back, talking about that, I think I came in right as it was starting to transition. I don't even think the Visi Carbon Flag, which is the first product Yak Attack came out with, was out yet. Scotty was kind of still one of the major players in accessories when I kind of got in, and Ram was not really in the kayak space, but a little bit, maybe starting to get in there. And so, but I remember making a camera pole, and I didn't have a GoPro wasn't out yet, but Kodak made a Play Sport that was a portable, similar to a GoPro in the sense it was waterproof portable camera. And I wanted to mount that thing and capture some of the stuff that we were doing. And so painter's pole, several pieces of PVC with bolts through it so you could articulate the different angles that you wanted on the end of it. And I kind of sometimes miss those days. Of course, it was simpler back then. I didn't work in the industry. I didn't need to film everything or do it for the show. So there was times when it was like, well, I can't go fishing, so let me go set up and rig on the boat or rig on this or whatever, and get innovative with coming up with ways to do it. I think one of my first kayaks was a Commander 120 from Wilderness Systems, which is a very open cockpit, almost canoe kayak hybrid. And I had that thing rigged. I had two deep cycle batteries. I had a Minn Kota motor I had chopped down, and I think the 403 was out, but there wasn't really a lot of motor options. And I had rigged it with foot control steering and had a switch where I could turn the front battery from the back battery. And I think that boat set about that far above the water once I had the motor and the two batteries and myself and everything else in it. And, but that was part of it. But then I went down that path and then kind of flip-flopped and got a Kusa when it came out. And it was like super simple. Like I didn't want all that stuff anymore. I was like kind of over it for a minute. With all the rigging. And I think now I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think boats being easier to rig makes it easier to want to add some things to it or put motors or whatnot. But for me, getting on the water, it really depends on what I'm doing. With the traveling that we do and fishing new locations, I'm very bad at and I don't know if it's bad or good, but I don't like tying on baits the night before. I like to kind of get there, see the conditions, see the water, because what will end up happening is I will inevitably tie on all these things and then get there and the water clarity is different or the wind's different. And then I'm just like cutting stuff off and changing because I know I won't have the confidence that I would have and that's where my time gets spent. If it's somewhere that I know and I know the conditions like around the house, I get pretty much everything ready to go and hit the water really quick. When I'm traveling, might as well plan on me spending the first 30 minutes retying everything.
Yeah, on a shoot, it's totally different. I mean, you're going to
no hurry. Just get over the fact that you're in a hurry. It's like,
For me, I launching a boat, so I've got a flats boat, and I've learned the courtesy on both ends of this. Right, launch the boat fast, get out of the way. Same thing with the kayak. Launch the kayak fast, get out of the way. Do all your rigging away from the ramp or away from the launch.
Very good advice.
Very different avenues, though, here. Going out and fishing for fun, I like simple 2 rods, a wading box, a paddle, and a kayak. I'm out light. I'm out fast. I'm in and out of the water. We're going. Tournament fishing is an entirely different animal. And redfish tournament fishing on the Gulf Coast down here has really ramped up in the kayak scene. We have live wells on our kayaks. So you're rigging a motor and a live well on the kayak. So like on my Kraken, I run the live well in the back and the Torpedo 403. And by the time you get it all rigged up and wheeled down to the water, you have to float the boat in order to get the wheels out from under it because there's just so much weight on this thing, and that's entirely different than just going out the back of a truck into a ditch with 2 fishing rods and going fishing. So there's 2 different, you got to be efficient both ways.
Yeah. And for us, like if I'm going here in San Diego, launch from the beach in La Jolla, people are like, why do you bring so many rods? I mean, I'll bring 5-6 rods. Just like a basket. But the main thing for us is, I got a rod for catching bait. I don't want to retie. So I have everything set. So I've got a rod for catching bait. I got maybe 1 or 2 rods set up for trolling. And then I have a rod for throwing iron. And then I got a rod for throwing soft plastics. And then I might have another rod for vertical jigging. And it's just like, boom, that way it's always, because you don't know. I might be going out for yellowtail or big game offshore outside the kelp and say, the wind came in, come into the kelp, and now you're switching up and you're throwing soft plastics for calico bass, or you're bounce balling for halibut or something. So it's like, I just bring a lot of stuff. I bring too much stuff.
That just speaks to the saltwater right there. I mean, I can tell you how many times I've been offshore, like even in Pensacola in the Gulf or whatever, and you're just not prepared for what you might see. Like I've been sitting there and blackfin tuna come by in a pod and they're jumping out of the water everywhere, and you're just like, you don't know what to throw because you're not thinking about that. We're trolling for kings. We're not, ready for that. So the next time you come out, you're bringing a rod, like just in case I want to have a rod ready to cast, something at that. Or like we had tarpon come through one day when we were sitting making bait in right past the surf. Bart Swab was out there. This is when the Coosa FD first came out, and we had the prototype drives, and you guys talked about them being better now than they were then. Well, the prototypes were a step even further back. This is like original flex drive prototypes, and we were identifying issues, is all I'll say. Anyway, we're not thinking about tarpon, and here comes a whole bunch of a tarpon coming through, and we just made do with what we had. But you kind of start like want to be prepared for whatever happens offshore. And I think that's when you're talking about saltwater kind of come at full circle. I just can't tell you how many times I've been even inshore and just like not like seeing something totally off the wall. Like you're fishing for reds, here comes a big school of giant Jack Crevalle. And you're just like, well, I'm going to throw something at them because that looks fun. It's like, you don't have that happen when you're bass fishing. Like it's bass. Well, and that's what,
and the beauty of the kayak, which should never be undersold, is you could be throwing bass gear and have a big fish go by, and you can still throw at it with confidence with a bass rod, because you're just going to get dragged. And right. I mean, I've landed I mean, I've got some line class stuff. I got a 68-pound thresher shark on 6-pound test. On my kayak and I used to tell people all the time with that is like, hook 6-pound test way over there and pull on it. Now, I'm not saying snap it, but you just put a bend in your rod, get yourself, and you can pull your kayak with 6-pound test. No problem. Snag 20-pound test, particularly like mono, snag 20-pound test on the bottom and try to break it. I mean, it's next to impossible. You're never putting as much pressure on that as you think you are. So it's just like you always have that chance. I landed a yellowtail out at Cedros. I landed a yellowtail in about 3 feet of water. All of a sudden, like you said, we're fishing calico bass, and these yellowtail just came crashing on a school of bait right up against the island, like where they shouldn't be. I got my bass rod through it, and I landed a 28-pound yellowtail on my little bass rod. 5 minutes after I landed that one, another yellowtail hit my heavy trolling rod. I couldn't land it. It broke me off because I was pulling so much harder, and trying to make sure I could muscle it in. It breaks me off. But the one on my little bass rod that I was being just super careful with and let it drag me around, I landed.
Yeah.
And that's a good topic really to get into, for kayak fishing is rods, and the different types of rods that are out there. Sometimes, like you're saying, you can really go too heavy with a rod in a kayak, wouldn't you say?
I think so. It's very
different. A million %. And I'll sorry if I'm taking up more of this than I should be, but big yellowfin tuna in Panama. And this fish, I got it up within about 30 minutes. I actually have the picture on the wall right in front of me. And I go to gaff this fish. It just blows up, rips the gaff out of my hand. Now, this was about a 125-pound fish. It went straight down. It kicked my butt for 2 more hours. I mean, it just wore me out. And I was using, because I thought, big tuna, I'm using a heavy tuna rod. And the next time I went, I brought a little bit shorter rod, a little bit more parabolic, much lighter rod, brought the fight closer to my body because with that really stiff rod, the fight was out here.
Right.
So bring that fight in closer to my body, and we were landing 100-pound yellowfin in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And sticking them, getting them up on the boat. And so, yeah, if you've got gear that's too heavy, it just beats you. And I honestly, I look at the guys like down at Los Busos, and all the credit in the world, those guys kill it. But sometimes I look at the gear, and it's kind of the same with I see it with guys in Hawaii. They're using just massive reels. And it's like, that's just so much weight on your arms where, like I said, I've landed a lot of marlin on little tiny reels. They don't even get halfway into the spool on those reels. So why are you going so enormous on the gear? It's just tiring you out because the boat is dragged, because the boat is going to get moving anyway. You don't need that huge line capacity. Now, there are exceptions to that, obviously. But for the most part, you're better off having a reel that is comfortable in your hand and you can manage fighting with than something that's just super heavy and has this massive amount of line capacity that you're never going to get into anyway. Like I said, I've landed marlin on a Trinidad 12. I mean, that's a little reel. And if you, as long as you're using good quality stuff, like, a Siegler reel with good smooth drags, and that's the key. It's got to be quality gear. It doesn't have to be big gear. Smooth drags, powerful, that'll make enough drag. No,
I think that goes for even the inshore stuff. I mean, Michael, you can probably attest to this. Like in the kayak, number one, you're way more in the elements than you are on a big boat or whatever. So your gear is going to get beat up naturally. So people sometimes have the mindset, well, I'm going to beat up my gear, so I want to buy cheaper gear if I'm going to beat it up in the kayak, but it's not going to last you and you're not going to enjoy the experience. So I go the other way. I buy better gear. Yeah, and then it can take the beating that we're going to give it to in the kayak. The other thing, and this goes even technique specific. I was thinking about this the other day. When you go buy a rod now, some of them have techniques written on them, and it's like you're buying this as the chatterbait rod or the spinnerbait rod or this is whatever.
Right.
But that is so subjective to where you're throwing that bait, what vessel you're fishing off of, or how you're fishing it, and what weight it is. And when you start really looking at the class of rod, whether it's medium heavy with a fast action or moderate action or whatever, like it's way different in the kayak, and that goes with line selection too. And most people throw crankbaits on a monofilament or whatever, so it's got the stretch and a more moderate rod. Well, you can get away with throwing stuff on braid that you normally would think you might need to throw on monofilament because the kayak is moving. You're not trying to bring the fish to you. Sometimes you're bringing the kayak to the fish. And that's why you can also get fish up a lot quicker. And if you have a net, now they may be a lot greener when you get them close to the boat, which is probably what happened with that yellowfin. You got it close to the boat, stuck it, and it was green because you brought yourself to it.
It's such a good point, because I mean, I was in Costa Rica on the East Coast and fishing for tarpon, and the guides were just amazed at how much faster we were landing the tarpon in the kayak than the guys were from the boat. And if you think about it, if you're fighting it from a boat, you've got all the weight of that boat, and the fish is fighting against that. Where in the kayak, you literally are winding yourself to the fish.
Yeah.
Unless it's in a straight down situation. But when it's out there, you're winding yourself to the fish. I mean, we had that with a black marlin. My buddy said within 20 minutes ago, this is a huge fish. He goes, I can get this fish up next to my kayak anytime I want, because the fish didn't even know he was there. It wasn't fighting him at all. It wasn't until we hooked him up to the camera boat, because he had been on it for 2 hours and it wouldn't fight, and it was getting dark. We hooked him up to the camera boat. It had all that weight. The fish jumped 3 times and straightened the hook. It is so different. The gear that you would have in a kayak, and people go, it's like, well, you want a kayak fishing rod? I'm not a bigger believer in kayak fishing rods, but it's situational, and I don't believe you just need that heavy gear.
I am a fan of higher speed reels specifically for that reason.
Yes.
What I've noticed especially in inshore with lighter rods, fishing for trout and redfish, a heavy rod, you crank down on it and they get moving, and the kayak's moving and the fish is moving and everything's going, and you've got all the slack you're trying to get out of there, especially if you're on a drift. So I like the 7.2 plus speed reels, and I throw a lot of Shimano. So I'm up at the 8.4s now, and I found out my hookup ratios are better. I land more fish with them. I'm a big fan of the higher speed reels, specifically because we're bringing the kayak to the fish. I
agree. I agree.
Yeah, it is different, and I think some of those things you learn over time, and you have to trial and error it. And I don't think I own a reel that's less than a 7, 2 or whatever now. Most of mine are that or higher.
Well, and I think, not to interrupt, but I think what people also need to understand is gear ratio is gear ratio. What you really want to know is line pickup. How much line are you picking up on that 7? Because I've got a reel that is 6.5, which is slower than I want anyway. But I don't like it. I mean, it's because it is so slow, because it's got a very small spool. So
yeah.
But I've got reels that are that exact same gear ratio that pick up a ton of line per crank. So it just depends. It's more important to know the line pickup rate than gear ratio.
That's a good point,
in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can attest too. I've had some instances with a 5.4 reel coming off a big boat, was using 5.4 reels to throw crankbaits, and slower revolution, get it down a little bit deeper. Moving to a kayak, throwing a chatterbait or something like that on a 5.4 reel is just asking for it, because you can't keep up with the fish.
Right.
There's just no way, especially with the boat moving. It's a nightmare.
Well, have you ever thrown like big poppers?
Oh yeah.
In the kayak? I mean, you're throwing big poppers. You're throwing a big popper, and you can't keep up. You can't make it work because the boat is the resistance off that big popper is pulling the kayak.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to have that high speed reel. Otherwise, you're not even going to be able to work the lure at all.
I really hope that's your wife.
I promise you, it's probably not my wife.
I bet that's James.
It might be. Yeah, it's Facebook user number 3.
Facebook user number 142.
That's funny.
You know what? Since I met you though, Jameson, that thing has gotten a lot lighter.
Oh, it's over here. Yeah, this over here.
It's gotten a lot lighter.
Yeah. And there's like a little one coming. This is my 4-year-old, and this is my 6-year-old.
Oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
This is my 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Why does it start here and here, Jim? I mean, give us younger guys a little insight. Why does it start patching in on the sides?
It's weird. It's weird. Beards are weird. But yeah.
I don't know where we was going with that one, but
yeah, I'm curious who this is, but we'll find out later, maybe.
Maybe when you get that text message.
So, Michael, you guide. I think I knew that already. And Jim, you have. I haven't done very little from a kayak. I've guided a little bit from. I had a cataract, like inflatable catamaran rig that I guided a little bit for a bit. Probably done like just a handful of kayak trips, but what I will say is, that's not a job that I want. That is a lot of work. It's a lot more work. I have a flat skiff as well. Jim and I actually took it to the Keys after
awesome boat.
ICAST.
Awesome boat.
And had a really great time on it. And I think it would be so much easier to put clients on that boat and take them out. But from a kayak standpoint, our friend Randy, who is a guide in the Keys, just thinking about him, even the way he thought about coming with us to guide us, he was like, oh, I don't need to bring a setup for both of you guys. We could have one setup on the boat and take turns, or we can have, a few baits. Like his mindset is so geared to every kayak having its own set of baits and its own set of rods and all that. And when we were all on the boat, he was just like, man, this is crazy. Like we just have like 1 8-weight, because we were fly fishing. It's like 1 8-weight, 1 9-weight, a few flies, and we're taking turns, and it's just a different, I don't know if anyone, I know the few trips that I took, I'll put it this way, the few trips that I took guiding from the kayak, my tips were way smaller than the tips I got from the cataract, which was way easier. Like the work was way less. And so I'm like, did they just think because it's a kayak, like I'm not as on the level of guide or whatever that a boat guide is, but it's the amount of work you put in is way more.
The stories I could tell, from years of guiding, and it's funny because you show up and you're just going by a conversation you had on the phone with somebody.
Yep. Or is it just back and forth? Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's
they
times that
rotary phones,
right? We didn't even have email, but they would misrepresent their skill level. I had guys show up down for a week-long trip in Baja, and we decided to drive down. Well, the reason they decided to drive down, because these guys didn't fit in an airplane seat, and they had never been in a kayak, and they could not get out of their own way, but they represented themselves as being these healthy outdoorsmen and guys who had done all this and that. And it's like, no. And then I've had guys here. I had a guy, probably one of the last years I was guiding a lot, that came out, flipped over in the kelp beds, hatches open, doesn't know how to self-rescue. And he came to me as a very, very experienced kayak angler, he said. But he did not know how to self-rescue. And the fact that he flipped over with hatches open, the fact that he had hatches open when he was fumbling around is like, so it's a lot of work. Yeah, I said it, but a lot more rewarding stories, I will say. I mean, there was so many great times, and I always told people in all the years I guided, I mean, I used to say I could count on one hand. It's probably grown to both hands now, the amount of trips that were just what I would say were really, really hard, that were just, and it was usually because of stuff like that, just misrepresenting their abilities.
I intentionally, on the boat, it's a different story, because on the boat you're working, whether it's a live bait trip or it's an artificial trip, you're rigged out for however many people you have on the boat. And I always have baitcaster setups on the boat, and then I watch who birds nest them, and I say, give me that back, take this spinning rod, but on the kayak side, I intentionally take them places where if you turtle, stand up, right? You're in 2 feet of water, right? So
we don't have that option here.
I know it's a different animal here. It's like, it's just stand up. We're going to be okay. One of my good friends is also a guide down here, and it's funny to watch him post stuff. He'll say 0 days since somebody rolled a kayak. The accident reporting of people going.
I would get kayak. I'm like, this kayak is so stable, I can stand on one side of it. There's no way you can flip this boat, and they will figure out how to do it. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like I said, and we're in deep water, so I had a guy on a trip in San Diego Bay, because I actually got to the point where I stopped taking people offshore. If they told me they were a beginner, I'm a beginner. I've never kayak fished. I want to catch a thresher shark. Like, no, we're going to go bay bass fishing. So I started everybody in the bay, and because it's nice and flat, you're not dealing with surf or swell or anything like that. And I had this guy, we paddled out. We'd been on the water about 15 minutes, and he starts rocking the kayak back and forth. This isn't as stable as the kayaks I've been on before. Flips the kayak, sends 3 of my rods to the bottom. It's like, so we spent the next 3 hours throwing treble hooks and just trying to snag my rods to get them back. I go, we're not fishing until we find these rods, and did never find them. But it's like, really? It's like, the things people will do will amaze you.
Oh yeah.
I think the flip side of that is, when you do take someone out kayaking or kayak fishing, and everything connects. They get a fish, whatever, and they land that fish, and you just see like something click with that person, and they're like, yeah, this 100%. This is for me.
Like I said, there was definitely a lot more positives like that than negatives. Unfortunately, the negatives are a lot of times are.
Well, they're the ones you're going to
more memorable.
Yeah, you're going to remember. You're going to remember those because they're going to stand out. And I'll say that, like, that inspiring. Like I mentioned this when Chad, we were talking about the topic, and I'm going to bring it up because I have to. But for me, this is a cool experience because to be sitting on a podcast with Jim and knowing that when I started kayak fishing, I was just like trying to grab, and this is me and my personality, like anything that I'm interested in, I just watch every video. I read every article. I try to absorb as much information. Even if I've heard it 10 times, I'll look for the next article, and it drives my wife crazy. So when I first got into kayak fishing and thought about kayak fishing, I was like, where's the information at, right? Well, that was Jim's show, and was out. And I think at the time, this was early on, I think it was, you had those Game On DVDs that before the show came
first.
out. Yeah. And so I saw one of those in a shop at Grand Dover Vision Company, which is where I worked for a little while part-time trying to get into the sport, and brought one of those home, found the show was coming out, started DVRing it. So it's just a really cool thing to be able to hang out and become really great friends with Jim, and go from what led me to where I'm at in kayak fishing was realizing that, it's not about just, I want to go get in a farm pond. Like, that's why I got a kayak, was to go get in a river, access something small water or whatever. But then watching the show with Jim and then just learning from taking it out, you realize like kayak fishing can take you really anywhere. There is not, I don't think that there is a limit. If there is, I haven't seen it, to what you can catch from a kayak or where you can take a kayak. And there is no other vessel. There is no other boat, let's say, that is as versatile as a sit on top kayak is. Like, Jim's boat is not going to go on the flats that Michael and I's boat will be able to fish, right? But we can't take our boats offshore where Jim goes in his boat. But with a kayak, we can literally access both those things. Now we might not be able to get there as fast or cover as much water, but it's just, there's something really cool about that to me is that you can have this one boat that can really do it all. I mean, if you want to do it, you can do it with a little bit of effort.
Yeah, and it's like people are like, oh, you take a kayak that far offshore, or you're in that big of water. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel a lot more seaworthy and comfortable in my kayak a lot of times than I do in boats. Kayaks are very, very seaworthy, and I feel very comfortable in that. But there is the bottom line that we're always saying is like, but there is a learning curve. If you're going to be a paddler, learn how to paddle, learn how to paddle properly, learn those safety things, learn how to get back on your damn boat. It's like, it's self-rescue.
Right.
Well, and we've all had that first day that we got in our brand new kayak and took it out for the first time, and the wind blew and it blew and it blew and we cussed that wind.
First day, I'm looking for the last day. Like, when's the day when that doesn't
This
happen?
is true. This is true.
That would be every one of my shoots. The wind is blowing.
That's what Michael was probably thinking when we came down to do the road trip angler down his way. I mean, what was it, blowing 45 miles an hour one day? It was like,
man. So those flats we launched at my first day down there. Dustin and I had fished a couple tournaments down there, and it was blowing like that. And that Kraken, Jim, turns into the wind. And I'm standing up, burning a spoon across the flats and realizing I'm doing 4 miles an hour, standing in the kayak, just hauling across the flats because, that's what it did.
Yeah.
I use a drift sock on those flats because we get out there, it's so windy. You throw a drift sock out and try to slow the boat down.
Yeah. The wind is not your friend.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think there's
it can be
anything
once you learn it a little bit. You learn to use that wind as your trolling motor and set yourself up. And
there's a threshold. I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, and we've all seen the wind that comes with the Jameson Redding event.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was Jim, but apparently it's both of us are Cameron. I don't know what it is.
I was in Sweden. I did a Sweden trip, and we were trolling, and trolling 3 rods. So you couldn't stop. Otherwise, your lines were going to tangle. And it was into the wind. So you definitely would have tangled because you'd drift backwards. And I paddled for 6 hours straight, nonstop, didn't get a bite. And my whole body cramped up and everything. But it was one of those things. You kind of get it in your head. And I actually enjoy paddling in the wind. I love paddling in lousy conditions. I hate fishing in it, but just to go out and challenge yourself and to paddle in those kind of conditions in a good paddling boat like the Kraken was just so much fun. I mean, you just put your head down and just charge, But you got to know how to paddle.
That's right. That is a skill set that even with a wide, stable boat that has a pedal drive, if something goes awry, you need to know how to paddle that thing back, right? You need to know how to paddle no matter what you're doing.
Well, I hear the NAR paddles well, right?
The NAR paddle.
I think it does.
NAR paddle's really fast.
I haven't paddled. I pedaled it a little bit.
It's not a Kraken for sure, but it's definitely a way more performance-oriented hull shape than, say, like our big rig was, or really even I think the Kusa. Actually, the Kusa FD paddles pretty well. But I think the NAR is even more efficient than that. And I've had to paddle it. We were in Gunnersville fishing, and we were trying to get to this way back creek that looked really good on the map. Didn't look as good when we got there, but I mean, we were in super shallow water, and anyone that's fished Gunnersville knows it's just loaded with grass. So no pedal drive was getting back there in that shallow water. Like, our bottom was almost touching the bottom plus grass all the way to the surface. So we had like 2 miles or so of paddling to do. And, I was actually pleasantly surprised on that trip that I didn't feel uncomfortable paddling that boat at all, that whole distance. Of course, we got back there. I caught like one fish like this big. I spent the whole entire time trying to get back there. But, yeah, I mean, it was nice when we got to where we could lower the drive and start pedaling again, for sure. It was nice to have that break. But I think, to your point, Michael, like it's almost more important when you're in a boat like that to know how to paddle than it is in a good paddling boat, because you can get away with being an inefficient paddler in an efficient paddling boat. But when you're an inefficient paddler in an inefficient paddling boat, like that's a recipe for disaster, and you're really going to be sore and hurting at the end of the day. Plus, you're probably going to be racking your knuckles. But it comes down to, just like we were talking about rods, is also choosing the right paddle for the boat that you're in and for the seat height and all that. It's way more important than how tall you are when choosing a paddle for kayak fishing, is how wide is your boat and how tall is your seat. And I think there's just an education factor that's missing in some aspects from kayak fishing in general. I remember, Jim, you used to have on your show the kayak fishing paddling tip of the week back in the day. I think Ken Whiting did a lot of them, but those are so valuable to me. Just learning a few basic paddling strokes to be able to maneuver and position the boat better.
Knowing how to do a sculling draw or a draw stroke, anything like that. I mean, it makes a huge difference. I'm lucky that I got into paddling before kayak fishing, so I learned how to be a paddler, and it makes a huge difference. And kind of to your point as well is, I mean, investing, if you're going to be a paddler, particularly if you are going to be a paddler, invest in a paddle. You know, that's your motor. That's going to be in your hand all day. So getting a good paddle, a good carbon fiber paddle, or at least a lightweight carbon fiber and fiberglass paddle makes a huge difference. Like, you know, I use Werner, you use Bending Branches, you know, but invest in that, because you get a paddle where the blade is just like, it goes through the water and just flexes. You know, the transference of energy is terrible. The paddles that come with Hobies are terrible. You know, you go try to paddle one of their boats, the blade just flexes backwards. So not only are you trying to push a big boat, you're doing it with a terrible mechanism. So having a good paddle to push that boat. But if you're going to be paddling all day, because it's not even just about paddling today, it's I want to paddle tomorrow too, you know, and putting out less energy and wearing yourself out less makes a huge difference. And investing in that good paddle. Yes, they're expensive. You know, my paddles are like $500, but guarantee you I have a lot more money in rods and reels sitting behind me, but the paddle's in my hand more. So,
right.
Two things never cheap out on are your paddle or your PFD. Those are items, whatever it takes to be comfortable and efficient with.
Well, and that can too testimony to when you go out and you're buying that first kayak or you're looking for kayak knowledge, is to hit up a genuine paddle sports shop and don't believe everything you read on a Facebook group or the internet or the different things like that. It's very important to hit a dealership, regardless of whatever type of boat it is. Get in there and get some paddle sports knowledge from the guys that got their feet on the floor.
Paddling classes are very cheap as well all over the country.
Yeah.
And it's
and you know, as a guide, I feel like if you're thinking about getting into kayak fishing and you have a kayak fishing guide in your area, then that right there, I mean, not only are you getting to go out and learn about your area and fishing, but you're also going to learn things about kayaking. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of value in doing that as well. Are you timing me out?
I will just say, and you know, I prided myself on being a very good paddler. There's some kayak fishing guides, some well-known kayak fishermen who honestly are terrible paddlers. I mean, I've watched them paddle. I've watched them teach people how to paddle. They're not good paddlers. So because you're a good kayak fishing guide, I mean, I would hope you're a good paddler as well, but they tend to lean more towards the fishing aspect. So going to a shop, like I've got a shop here in San Diego that is a paddle shop. It's all about touring boats and all that. And ACA certified paddling instructors, you know, they are going to give you better paddling instruction. Yeah. I feel for the most part.
That's for sure.
You know, because you with kayak fishing guides, a lot of them, and I'm not going to say all, because there are some great paddlers also, but there are some guides out there who that's not their focus. I used to do a surf safety and paddle skills class. So it's to teach people the safety aspects, how to launch and land through the surf, and the paddling aspects. Because like I said, I was lucky. I started out learning how to paddle from exceptional paddlers. But not everybody is that. So like I said, it makes a huge difference. And I try to emphasize it all the time, is it really does make a huge difference knowing how to paddle properly. It's not rocket science, obviously, because I can do it, but there's just that little bit of technique, learning to use the torso rotation, learning to use your whole body, your legs, it makes a huge difference. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about being a paddler, learn how to paddle properly. And I think that's one of the reasons pedal boats are so popular, because there's no skill. Honestly, I mean, you jump onto a pedal boat and you pedal. I mean, if you know how to pedal a bike, you pedal. It's not, there's no learning curve there. I mean, I hope you learn some safety skills and paddling knowledge anyway, but you can just get in there and do this with your legs, where there is, like I said, it's not huge, but there is a certain amount of technique involved in paddling properly.
Well, and that paddle can still, even with the pedals, that paddle can save you in a situation.
Oh, for sure.
Well, you may get in water where you're not able to get deep enough, or you may, they're mechanical, right? There's a failure aspect there, no matter how durable it is. I mean, you may hit something, break a prop, whatever. I mean, you're required. I think you're required by the Coast Guard to carry some type of paddle on a motorized boat. Now, what good you're going to do with it in some most motorized bigger boats, I have no idea. But like, you should have one, and I've seen it come in handy on, especially on a flat skiff, because you can actually move the boat. And so there is an aspect again of education. I mean, and you were talking about a good shop earlier. I think a good, like, if you're like a bow hunter, for example, I dabble in bow hunting. I like to bow hunt. I enjoy shooting my bow. I'm not going to go to a big box store to get my knowledge about what bow and what arrows are supposed to be shot, because there's a level of safety there. You put the wrong arrow with the wrong, bow and poundage and speed, you're going to end up with a busted arrow or messed up limbs on your bow or whatever. Like, so you go somewhere that you're going to trust the person telling you, hey, this is the right setup for you. I've set it up to your draw length. We've paper tuned this bow. We picked out the right arrows, and these are the right broadheads or the weights that you should be shooting with this setup. And all that knowledge is valuable, and you're going to get that at that specialty shop. And the same thing goes with kayaks. I mean, getting that knowledge and educating yourself, that not just from a fishing standpoint. And anglers, we're all notorious for this. Like, we want to learn, what's the next best bait? What's the next best technique, or how to fish, how to catch that fish? And you forget about the fact that how you're getting to those areas and how you're maneuvering your boat, or how you're controlling your boat. If you're on a big boat and you got a trolling motor, you got to learn how to use that trolling motor to position that boat properly. If you got electronics, you need to learn how to read your electronics, right, to be able to utilize them. What's the point in having a $3,000 fish finder if you don't know how to, use the different functions that it has? And it's the same thing with kayaks, whether it's pedal or paddle. You really need to understand how to utilize that vessel and how to be safe in that vessel in case it does, go the wrong way. But that goes all the way down to how you dress, the clothes that you're wearing when you're out in the water in a kayak. I mean, everything about it, you really need to think about, and you extend your period on the water, and your experience is better on the water. And then you're not thinking about, man, I'm freezing to death, or I'm whatever. Like, you're concentrating on fishing instead of thinking about how uncomfortable you are.
That's big, Jameson. I don't think enough people think about the clothing, and it is such a huge aspect of wearing the right clothing when you're on the water, particularly as we get into these colder months. I see guys out there wearing Levi's and boots and a big, Pendleton or whatever, or a hoodie, and just wearing all the wrong stuff, and no PFD, of course, but having the right clothing, it's really a safety thing, but just comfort wise, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
You're wearing a cotton sweatshirt and it gets wet. It's wet. It's staying wet. get the right stuff that it wicks away the moisture and it dries quickly. It's going to increase your enjoyment on the water. But while it's doing that, it's also making you a lot safer.
Well, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when something happens.
So
that's huge.
That's big. And there you go with your float plans and making sure you have a way of contacting somebody. I can tell you that I've been stuck in a marsh where the water drained out and come back out and go, oh crap, I've got like 200 yards to drag this kayak to float.
That's a terrible feeling.
That mud is waist deep, and you do that once and you learn a whole lot of skill sets about stuff like that and what not to do again. Right. But really, I think responsibly as anglers and as, team members and as stewards of, the kayak fishing industry, that's the information we need to be able to share with people coming up through the ranks. Because if you can stop somebody from having a bad day like that just by sharing some knowledge, that's a big thing. And, doing it with the guide thing and doing it with writing and doing it with talking to people at these shops and getting involved is it's what we do.
And it's not a matter of just that. It's, as I always said, it for people who are trying to set themselves up in a position where people are looking up to them or trying to take advice from them. Well, if you're doing that, also set yourself up as an example. You'll never see me on the water, although there are pictures of me out there from the early days, of me not wearing a PFD. But I mean, that's never happens anymore, and hasn't for many, many, many years. It's just, and it's probably it's the guys who least likely need it, are the ones who should be wearing it, again, just to be setting an example for those who are looking up to you or looking at you for instruction or guidance. Because like I said, you see these guys in certain areas and they're young strapping guys and they're bulletproof, but I mean, let's face it, guys die doing this sport every year.
No. And in Michael's
they're
case,
bulletproof,
he's in like he said earlier, you're in 2 feet of water sometimes, but sometimes you're in mud, sometimes you're crossing a channel. And the thing is, like when you're posting pictures or videos or whatever out there, no one knows how deep the water is where you're at. Like you said, Jim, you're setting an example. And I know we've kind of hijacked this, Chad. You got 3 very passionate people about safety
this is good knowledge
and learning the sport. So we kind of moved away from fishing talk into things that we're all obviously passionate about. So
this is fishing talk, especially as we're heading into fall and the temperatures are dropping everywhere. This is the kind of information that I think is important for people, especially new people coming into the sport. If they stumble across this and find it and they listen to the whole thing, then they're gonna walk away with a little bit of education. I think, for us at Jackson Kayak and this Dock Talk thing, and that's what we want. That's what we want the show to be, whether it's fishing, paddling education. It's a plethora of knowledge from a plethora of individuals.
Yeah. Well, I just know for me, if I look back at my short career so far in kayak fishing, the things that have been the most impactful have been not the learning more about the fishing techniques, right? Like they've been impactful. I've caught more fish and became a better fisherman. But the things that have been really impactful that have made me a better fisherman, if I really think about it, a lot of them have to do with being able to maneuver my boat properly or maintain my boat position. That's huge and that doesn't matter if you're in a big boat or a small boat or a kayak, a canoe, whatever. Boat position is probably one of the biggest things when it comes to catching fish, because if you're not in the right place and casting in the right area, then you're not catching fish. Like you got to be able to maintain boat position and just being safe and comfortable, like knowing that I have the confidence in my gear to keep me dry or keep me cool when it's hot and warm when it's cold and safe when I'm out on the water. Those are the things that have really been the most impactful, over the last decade or so of kayak fishing for me, more so than learning how to tie a uni knot versus an Albright, right? Like I'm going to catch fish on a uni knot. I'm going to catch fish on an Albright knot. Like that really isn't going to change whether or not I catch fish. It might affect my confidence, or it might affect, like, I might have not tied one of those correctly and lose a fish. But that really doesn't affect me. Or, think about baits. I think about my progression in baits, and I throw way different baits than I did back then. Back then it was all Cinco, all finesse fishing. Now it's all power fishing. But those Cincos and stuff didn't quit working. I just changed because I wanted to change. But what's not changed is a PFD that fits, a paddle that is the right size and is the right material, having the right boat for the right conditions. Not every kayak is made for going down a river that has rapids. Not every kayak is made perfect for offshore, but finding that balance of where I'm using that boat and the right boat for it. Those are the things that are way more impactful, I think, from a kayak fishing standpoint. One of the word, kayak is the first word in the sport, right? It's kayak fishing. So if you ain't got that part down, then it's going to be hard to really like dial in the rest of your game.
Yeah, and I've said this for many years. It's just that it's kayak anglers are anglers first and kayakers second, and if they would try to increase that kayak level a little bit, they're going to increase their enjoyment because they're going to be more comfortable. Just like as learning how to paddle. Because I can now go farther and get back, without being worn out. It's knowing that if I do have a situation, I've got a VHF radio on my chest. I've got my PLB on my PFD. I'm always wearing the PFD. I'm wearing the right clothes if I do go in the water. I've rescued a lot of guys over the years, and a lot of them, again, were not wearing PFDs, not wearing the right clothes, didn't know how to self-rescue. Like I said, didn't have a bilge pump on their boat. I've rescued a lot of guys with flooded boats, and it's usually not boat failure. It's something they did wrong. Like I said, flipping with a hatch open, just different stuff. But it will increase your comfort. If I've got 100% confidence in my gear and 100% confidence in my boat and the way it's rigged and 100% confidence in my skill level, I'm so much more comfortable when I'm 3, 4, 5 miles offshore and a little bit of wind comes up. It's like, okay, well, so man, it sucks, but I got to paddle back in the wind. It's,
I don't know if I'll ever be prepared for when the fog rolls in, because there's something
fog
that
sucks.
Mindset wise, I don't care if you're in 2 feet of water and you know the land is right there. When fog rolls in, it does something to my mind where I'm just like, all right, I'm offshore now.
Even the best GPS, it messes with you.
Okay,
I'm in the Bermuda Triangle and I'm gonna die right now.
I'm going to tell 2 quick fog stories, and I know I keep kind of jumping in on stuff, but just because I've been doing it so long. So my 2 quick fog stories. One, out trolling out off La Jolla, probably 4 or 5 miles off the beach. And I just happened to stumble across some dude in the dense fog. And he's like, Jim, beach is that way, right? And I'm like, well, I'm sure there is a beach that way on Hawaii. But he literally, because it was a flat, calm day and foggy, he had no idea north, south, east, west.
That'd be me.
And I had a GPS, and this was in the early days when I literally had one of these handheld Garmin GPSs. But because I've always been super safety focused, I had one. My other fog story, and this is I'm on my boat and I'm cruising around La Jolla, where I know there's a lot of kayak fishermen. And the fog rolls in, and we've got 3 sets of eyes on the horizon, and I'm creeping because I know where we are. And I know there might be kayakers around. And all of a sudden, these 3 kayakers come out of the fog like 20 feet off my bow, all on gray kayaks, wearing black clothing, and not a single one of them had a headlight or a PFD, anything bright on them at all. And that's when I really learned how invisible we are on the water. You add a little bit of swell to that, and you're down in a trough. You are 100% invisible. So, guys, make yourself visible. When the fog is the worst, but even on any day, make yourself visible.
Probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been in the fog was actually waiting 200 yards away from the boat. And I'm throwing a 7-foot rod, and I can't see past the end of the rod tip. And you hear a boat motor coming in, and you're like, okay, we're going to see what happens,
That's an eerie feeling. I've had that happen in the kayak. Had a boat motor coming through the fog, and you're like, I hope he's a little further out than he sounds like.
That's right.
Well, we've all seen the videos of guys having too close of interaction with boats on their kayaks on perfectly clear days.
Right.
You throw fog into that, man, and it is just brutal.
So it's interesting, and I don't know how long you have scheduled here, Chad, but that flag
you guys just go.
The flag over your shoulder there, Jim, and the picture on the back of your kayak. I had a conversation with the shop manager at GOPC, he's a touring kayaker. He loves to travel and go touring. He knows how to kayak very well.
There you
go. Other side, yeah. And the Visi Carbon was an item that we sold there, and he's like, I just don't get this. This is wind resistance. I would never want this on my touring kayak. It's just going to slow me down. I want to cover distance. I go, think about it though for a second. Kayak anglers go out to a spot where they want to fish. They stop paddling, and now the only thing, they're just sitting still. And typically those spots are on points of lakes or in creek mouths or something where boats are probably running around wide open, and we're not, our paddle's not up in the air, our paddle blade, which is why you see a lot of brighter paddle blades, why I like a brighter paddle blade, because that will be the most visible thing usually when you're out there and you see kayaks. It'll be that paddle blade going up and down. Or even like your clothing, you wear brighter stuff. But that flag is bright, it's orange, and having a light that you can leave on low light, because we're usually going to fish till dark, or we're going to get out there right at the cusp of daylight. And in some cases you're required to have a 360-degree light even on a kayak anyway. And I think Dustin made a comment there in the comments about that. But that piece of gear, while it may look like, why would you want that, right? You're slowing yourself down. It's wind resistance, more gear to take. That will be the thing that allows you to see each other. I know when we're out filming the TV shows, and when I've been with you, Jim, filming, like, it's kind of how you keep track of each other. You're like, well, there's this flag, he's over there. It'll be the first thing you see. Yeah,
it makes it so much. I was actually very surprised at what a difference it makes in seeing somebody, and for people who are like, they don't like it flapping around, and I've actually had it catch hooks and stuff. If you take that thing is a pouch. If you're doing it during the day, that thing's a pouch. So just slide it over the top of the Visi Carbon so it's this way instead of sideways as a flag. You still have that bright orange thing up there, but it's not flapping and catching wind and driving you crazy. So that's what I tend to do on daylight trips. But I have that thing on a lot, and it definitely, like I said, when we've been on shoots and you're looking for the guys you're fishing with, it makes it a lot easier, and it makes you much easier to spot.
Yeah, it's a simple thing, but it makes sense.
I believe Power Pole even has a flag that will attach to the micro anchors now on the.
They do. Yeah. It's Yakatax, the head of the light and the flag part of the Visi Carbon. They made it for Power Pole, and it attaches on a 1/4-20 thread there. So that's like way up in the air. That's at the top, obviously at the top of 8-foot Power Pole. But
down here in the marsh, if you think about fishing a marsh system, on a kayak, you're at water level, and that the grass covers you up. And we fished plenty of tournaments with 2-3 guys where you're 20 yards away from somebody and you have no idea they're there because the grass is high enough that it's covering you going out. So having the flag up higher, or having even one of the things I do, if we're the guide wise thing of doing, is I crank my popping cork all the way up to the top of the rod so that I have this bright pink or bright yellow thing 7 feet off the top of the kayak so that they can see where I am.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times my camp in Louisiana where I've seen a boat go by and all you see is the power pole like sticking up, it's like because the grass like you're talking about where you're just like, where's everybody at?
Yeah, and you watch some of these videos of guys just ripping through channels and stuff in a skiff or an airboat or whatever, and it's like they're going to be on you quick. So anything that can help you.
That airboat comment, I was thrown out of my kayak a couple of years ago in the marsh. It was duck season. I ran the 403. I was 6 miles out in the marsh, and I heard that airboat fire up, and I went, "Oh no!" Like I'm in an 8-foot wide slough, and he's real close. And he came around the turn, and he saw me, and I had already moved to the bank, and he went up on the grass, and when the wake and everything threw me right out of my kayak up onto the grass. I mean, I didn't go swimming, but I went up into the grass, and he circled around to find me to make sure I was okay. And when he shut down next to me, he was like, "Holy shit!" I mean, I've never seen a kayaker back here, and I'm like, we're all over the place,
right?
I mean, literally, we're all over the place. And like, to Jim's point about not seeing until you're on top of another kayaker when you're in the boat, that perspective, you have to understand that as a kayaker and know what kind of situation you're putting yourself into.
Always assume you're not seen.
Correct.
Well, and to that guy, like, I mean, the airboats, why would he not be flying through there? He probably knows it like the back of his hand. And a lot of times on the flats, I mean, this Texas is known for this. You come off step, that's where you stay. Like
that's right.
Get on plane, and you got to stay on plane, to make it off that flat, or
absolutely
or have it because you're not getting back up once you come off. And it's the same thing in Louisiana. I've been down there at my camp, and the wind blow hard out of one direction for a day, and then there's no water left. And you look down in a place that you normally have water, and you're like, well, if I stop now, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of the day. And
so wait, the wind blows in Louisiana?
Yeah, I think it blows everywhere that we go.
Absolutely.
Every time I've been.
Yeah. We still caught fish though. Can't say
still one of the cooler places I've been. I mean, if you haven't been down there, guys, get down to Pack. It is an amazing destination. That's for sure. I'd love to get back. If they stop getting hit by hurricanes all the time,
that'd be awesome.
Hurricane Jameson.
I'll bring it.
Oh man, let's see here. Well, guys, we've been an hour and 17 minutes and counting. So I guess I'll let you guys go if you want to. If you want to keep going, we'll keep going. But so big thing, Dock Talk. You guys have taken the Dock Talk challenge. Tell everybody where to find you on social media, and thank the sponsorship people that you want to thank, and shout out to whoever. Go,
Mike.
You can find me on Instagram there at Mad Fiorenzo, or the guide service at Shallow Works, WORX. And big thanks to Jackson Kayak, obviously, being on the team and being with everybody and learning from everybody and being part of the JK family is huge. Anglers Anonymous here in Texas, and Fish Hide Sportswear, Salty Dog Hat Company, Red Tail Optics. We've had a lot of fun with all of these. K-Den Lures as well as one of my lure sponsors. And it's been a blast.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Jameson.
Well, you can find me.
We blowing up.
Let me get my pad out now.
That's right.
You guys comfortable? No, there are some.
I just start looking around my room.
You guys just play some music if I talk too long here. But definitely find me at Jameson Redding on Instagram. So it's really complicated. Jameson Redding or Jameson Redding Fishing on Facebook. The new YouTube channel is just launched, and that's the Road Trip Angler. So you got to find that. And then, sponsors, there's a giant list of great companies that have helped me. Obviously, Jackson's been the biggest part of this entire lifestyle change that I made about 10 years ago or whatever. But yeah, so many branches, NRS, Cigar, Gemini, both love throwing the Cigar. Deck Systems has come on board. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on of great companies that have been blessed, honestly, with great support. So if I didn't name you, don't get mad. I'm just trying to give Jim all the hour and a half long that he needs.
I don't have a show.
Yak Attack. We can't not think Yak Attack. Yak Attack has been a great sponsor.
Yeah, they're one of the oldest ones. Ballast Point.
Now that's one I don't have, and if anyone's listening out there, and when I say anyone, if anyone's listening out there, shameless plug.
Well, I am not only plugging Ballast Point, but also my Padres, who have made it into the postseason.
Yes,
which they haven't done in a long time. So
welcome to October baseball.
Yeah, I am not super confident, but fingers crossed. So you can find me at the Kayak Fishing Show with Jim Sammons on Facebook. I have no idea what I am on Instagram. Kayak Fishing Show.
You're the Kayak Fishing Show. I know.
The Kayak Fishing Show.
I tagged you the other day. Gosh.
Kayak Fishing Tales on YouTube has hundreds of videos, a lot of episodes of the show, all that stuff.
Most of them are in black and white, but
yeah, silent. They have no sound. They're back in the silent movie days.
Mime and fish catches.
So that's where you can find me, of course. Great sponsors like Jackson Kayak, Siegler Reels, which is an awesome made in America company, and great people, which is as important as anything. Like I said, Yak Attack, Naqua, Maui Jim Sunglasses. All these companies have been with me for a very long time. Probably one of my oldest sponsors, Standard Horizon, VHF radios, Ray Marine, my electronics, and they've been really good to me. So a lot of great
literally are looking around the room right now. Like
I do. I literally I've always got something laying here. It's like, let's see. Here's my Naqua battery.
Just set them all up on the desk so you can remember.
We'll go back to my Siegler reel.
Yeah. There's so many great companies that have supported the sport of kayak fishing. I think it's really cool to see now. We were at ICAST this year, Jim, and you look back like 6-7 years ago, you didn't really see kayak fishing that much as far as being represented at ICAST. But now you can't walk around the show and not see a picture of a guy on a kayak fishing or a video that has a kayak fisherman in it.
Or and any kayak fishing in their catalogs.
Yeah, it's
I literally I can go back to, and obviously again because I'm old. When I was with Ocean Kayak, Johnson Outdoors was at ICAST for Minn Kota and whatever, Humminbird and all that. And we could not get them to put a kayak in the booth. It's like, kayak fishing was just really getting going. They sold Ocean Kayak. Ocean Kayak was a Johnson Outdoors brand, and they wouldn't put a kayak in the booth, and there was no kayaks at the show. And you fast forward to now, and there's a lot of kayaks at the show. A lot of kayaks that shouldn't be at the show, but there is a lot of kayaks at the show, and a lot of companies geared, on the periphery, making the accessories and the stuff that they're trying to gear towards kayak fishing. Some that make sense, some that don't.
Well, and shout out to
a
the
lot
ones
of cool stuff.
Believed in it since the beginning, even down to the paddle sports brands like Branches or NRS that has specifically made stuff for the kayak angler, not just I know in some cases it may be as simple as putting a tape measure on the paddle. Man, how many times have I used that tape measure on my Branches paddle? Like, it's just the fact that they're thinking about us, and so I have to say, appreciate that from not just the personal support, but the brands that have supported the industry that have helped.
Yeah, the industry in general it's been amazing, and it's grown so much, and that's what's made it as able to do this, how the sport has grown to now they're really, back in the day, there was this kayak and there was that kayak. And now there literally is a kayak for everybody. There's not too many people you can say, I can't find a kayak that's going to work for you. There's a kayak for everybody and for every application and different types of water. And that's one of the things that's super cool of how this sport has grown over the years.
For sure.
Absolutely. You're done, Jim.
Shut up.
Anyway, folks,
I've had a couple of beers. Leave me alone.
Jim, you're welcome back anytime you want to come. We enjoyed having you on Dock Talk. Same to you, Michael. Jameson,
thank you.
As always.
Not so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Jameson.
Super fun.
Yeah, it was super fun. You guys were a great show. I think everybody learned a lot, and it's educational. And now you guys know what Dock Talk really is.
Hey, maybe we'll come back on and actually talk about fishing next time.
No, it don't matter. We can come on and talk about Mr. Pickle. I don't care.
Oh, there you go.
But that's going to be taken really out of.
Yeah, you guys have to ask us personally. Email Jim and ask Jim if you want to know more about that topic. It's actually Jim's OnlyFans account, if you guys are wondering.
Yeah, I can't run those across the bottom. But if you guys are looking for a brand new Jackson kayak, check out your local dealership. A lot of them are running 15% off right now. And if you need to know where you find your local dealer, jacksonkayak.com. Also on that note, this whole thing is Orion Podcast Network. We're a network now. We've got 2 whole shows. 2. It's huge.
Very
We're
cool.
going places.
It's blowing up.
It's blowing up. My mom listens. So yeah, price drop on Orion coolers. If you guys are in the market for an Orion cooler, check us out. jacksonkayak.com again. We're cheaper than the Yetis. So there's that. Best cooler you can ever have. Bigger. True quartz. Cooler accessories. Anyway, that's Dock Talk.
Awesome.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.